All right. Hello, everybody. We are going to start our study on the book of Esther with this video. I said before that the book of Esther is really unique because it doesn't mention God directly. You can see God work in the background. You can see how he manipulates and orchestrates things, circumstances and people and things like that to achieve his desired outcome, but he's not mentioned directly in the Bible, in the book of Esther. But the book of Esther is a very interesting book. It's got all the elements. If you wanted to make a movie of the week, Esther would be a good book to make it from, because it's got the good guys, the bad guys. It's got all the plot twists and everything. And just when you think, something's going to happen, then something else happens. And so we're gonna look at that, and we're going to go through it, and we're going to see what this book is all about. So in the book of Esther, in chapter 1, it says, "Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus," this was the Ahasuerus who reigned over 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia. "In those days, when King Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan the citadel, that in the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast for all of his officials and servants, the powers of Persia and Media, the nobles and the princes of the provinces being before him, when he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the splendor of his excellent majesty for many days, 180 days in all." So the king, who here is Ahasuerus, that's his Hebrew name. His Greek name is Xerxes. That's how most history books are going to record him. King Xerxes the first. King Xerxes was the son of Darius the first, who, if you remember in the book of Daniel chapter 6, with the handwriting on the wall, that story, Darius was the one that figured out how to divert the Euphrates River that flowed through one gate in the city of Babylon. He diverted the river into some nearby marshes, which dried up the riverbed, and then his soldiers, his men, were able to just literally walk right into the city and take the city of Babylon. So that was Darius the first. Xerxes the first is his son. Now Xerxes, the palace that the book of Esther talks about here, where this party takes place, archaeologists have actually found that palace, or the ruins of it, of course. But they know exactly where it was. They know exactly how big it was. And so the character and the location of Xerxes and Susa, the capital of Persia at that time, have been archaeologically verified. Now, Xerxes was king over the Medo-Persian Empire, or Medo-Persian Empire. It was a joint empire between the Medes and the Persians. And the capital city was Susa. This was probably the winter capital, and it was out in the desert. It was hot, and so they would move from the other capital city to Susa during the winter, and it was a fairly expansive complex. And the kingdom itself, though, was 120. Let me double check this now. 120 or 127 provinces. So just think of a country with, like the United States of America, and each state was a province. And then within those provinces, you had different tribes, if you will, or different groups of people who maybe spoke a different language than the tribe next to them. So you had different dialects and stuff. So there are a lot of languages spoken in this empire. And anything that went out from the king had to be in the language of everybody. And, even all the dialects and the ones that didn't have a spoken language, but they had a written language, it had to be written so that everybody would understand, what was being done. So this guy's giving a party. Now, he's giving a party. Mainly, it's kind of a pep rally, because he's been planning, and he's still planning at this time, to invade Greece. He wants to overthrow Greece and conquer Greece. So this is sort of a party for all of his military commanders, the noblemen, the movers and the shakers in the kingdom. He's showing off his wealth. He's showing off his grandeur, his splendor, how rich he is, how powerful he is, how mighty he is. And this is the party that you and I would want to go to. But sadly, we wouldn't get invited to this one. This was for all of the influential people, the people who had political power, the people who he needed on his side to help him with this conquest of Greece that he was planning. This lasted 180 days. Okay, for those of you that are not good in math, that is 6 months. This was a 6-month long party. And after this party, he had another party. This was for everybody else in the city. Slaves, free, poor, rich. If you owned a business, if you didn't own a business, if you begged for money, this was for everybody. This is a party you and I would have gone to. And this one lasted 7 days. And the Bible talks about it in verse 5 here. It says, when these days were completed, the days of the 180-day party, the king made a feast lasting 7 days for all the people who were present in Shushan, the citadel, from great to small, in the court of the garden of the king's palace. There were white and blue linen curtains fastened with cords of fine linen and purple on silver rods and marble pillars. And the couches were of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of alabaster, turquoise, and white and black marble. And they served drinks in golden vessels, each vessel being different from the other, with royal wine in abundance, according to the generosity of the king. In accordance with the law, the drinking was not compulsory, for so the king had ordered all the officers of his household that they should do according to each man's pleasure. So again, it's talking about all the wealth and all the splendor of the palace. And, you know, you can see behind me, this is a picture of a palace from that time, and the mosaic and the color and the gold and the gilt. And it's just very lavish. And Donald Trump would probably be happy in a place like this. I don't know. But he gives this party for 7 days, and it says that the drinking was not compulsory. And that's kind of neat, because in that day and time, if the king drank, everybody at the party had to drink. It was, I guess, a sign of respect or something. If you didn't drink when the king drank, then you were being rude. But the king had made sure that everybody knew that you drink if you want to drink. If you don't want to drink, that's okay. You don't have to leave. If you didn't want to drink under the old law, you had to leave the room. You had to leave the party. But here, if you don't want to drink, you don't have to drink. So that's very magnanimous of him, very gracious of him to not make people drink. So he's having this party. It's 7 days. And then it says in verse 9, Queen Vashti, that's his wife, the queen, also made a feast for the women in the royal palace, which belonged to King Ahasuerus. So in another section of the palace is the women's section, the women's dormitory, if you will. And the queen is having a party for all the women in the kingdom, in the capital city. So the women aren't left out. They're having their tea and crumpets over there, and the men are out here drinking wine and telling, dirty jokes and whatever. And it says, on the 7th day, so this is the last day of the party, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, in other words, he was 3 sheets to the wind, he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, I don't know, Zethar, and Carcass, 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of King Ahasuerus. So eunuchs were servants who had been surgically altered so that they could serve the women in the palace without any adverse reactions. And he ordered them to bring Queen Vashti before the king wearing her royal crown in order to show her beauty to the people and the officials, for she was beautiful to behold. So I kind of think it might have happened like this. The men, they've been drinking for 7 days, and best wine, king's wine, nothing finer. And the conversation comes up. One group of men says, Median women are the most beautiful women in the world. And then another group of men says, no. Persian women are the most beautiful women in the world. And then the king stands up and everybody gets quiet, like E.F. Hutton. And he says, your queen, my wife, is the most beautiful woman in the world. And of course, they're not going to argue, it's the queen. And he says, she's not Persian or Median, she is Babylonian. And of course, you hear all the, all the whispers and stuff going through the room. And he says, would you like to see her? Well, none of them had probably seen Queen Vashti up close. So they've been drinking for 7 days. So of course, they want to see her. So the king orders these 7 eunuchs to go find Queen Vashti hosting her little tea party with the women. And he says, wearing her royal crown. It's not implicitly stated in here, but many scholars think that what this meant was wearing her royal crown and nothing else. Because after all, he is showing her beauty to these men. He's showing off, and he wants her to come in and show her beauty. So the eunuchs go in, they tell her. Verse 12 says, but Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command brought by his eunuchs. Therefore, the king was furious and his anger burned within him. This had never happened. The queen was the queen. She was, second person in the kingdom, but the king was the king. And if the king said, you jump, then the queen said, how high? And this queen said, no, I'm not having that. I'm not going to go out there wearing just my crown for all these men and hear all the whistles and the cat calls and get pinched and poked and whatever. So no, I'm not going to do it. So verse 13 says, and the king said to the wise men who understood the times, for this was the king's manner toward all who knew law and justice, those closest to him being Karshina, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marcina, and Memucan, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, who had access to the king's presence and who ranked highest in the kingdom. So these are his top advisors. These are his most trusted counselors. And he says, what shall we do to Queen Vashti according to the law? Because she did not obey the command of King Ahasuerus brought to her by the eunuchs. He said, what are we going to do? This has never happened before. I don't know what to do. And I've been drinking for 7 days. And I probably couldn't find my way to the bathroom by myself if I needed to. And now she does this, and I don't know what to do. So what do we do? Verse 16 says, and Memucan answered before the king and the princes. Here's what he said. Queen Vashti has not only wronged the king, but also all the princes and all the people who are in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. Why? For the king's behavior will become known to all women, so that they will despise their husbands in their eyes when they report King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought in before him, but she did not come. This very day, the noble ladies of Persia and Media will say to all the king's officials that they have heard of the behavior of the queen. Thus, there will be excessive contempt and wrath. It's going to be chaos. It's going to be anarchy. All the women of the kingdom are going to start disobeying their husbands now. It's going to be a total societal collapse if we don't do something about this now. He's wanting to do a Barney Fife and just nip it in the bud, So he says in verse 19, if it pleases the king, let a royal decree go out from him and let it be recorded in the laws of the Persians and the Medes so that it will not be altered, that Vashti shall come no more before King Ahasuerus. Okay, so she can't come to the king anymore. She's not queen. Let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she. And when the king's decree, which he will make, is proclaimed throughout all his empire, for it is great, all wives will honor their husbands, both great and small. So you got to send out a decree and say, okay, Queen Vashti messed up. I called for her. She didn't come. She ain't queen no more. And that's going to send a message to all the wives in the kingdom that they better do what their husbands tell them, or the same thing could happen to them. Now, this phrase that says, let it be recorded in the laws of the Medes and the Persians so that it will not be altered, that was the standard practice for the Persian kingdom. When a law was made, it couldn't be changed, it couldn't be altered, it couldn't be repealed or revoked. It was a law in perpetuity, forever. So any law that was made in Persia, it was law forever. You couldn't change it. You couldn't alter it. You couldn't repeal it. And that's going to be important later on in the story. So verse 21 says, and the reply pleased the king and the princes, and the king did according to the word of Memucan. Then he sent letters to all the king's provinces, to each province in its own script, okay, and to every people in their own language, okay, the different dialects, that each man should be master in his own house and speak in the language of his own people. So this law has gone out now. All the women need to obey their husbands. There's no reason for anybody to say, well, I didn't understand it, because it's in every language, it's in every dialect. Everybody understands it, and women better straighten up and make sure they're obeying their husband, or they might just get kicked out of the house and their husband find a new wife. So that's chapter 1 of the book of Esther, and that's kind of setting the stage for the next part of the story. Now, getting back to this invasion that King Xerxes was planning, he'd been planning this for a while. And between the end of chapter 1, where we are now, and the beginning of chapter 2, he goes and invades Greece, and he does pretty good for a while, but he ends up getting defeated, and he comes back home with his tail between his legs. And that's 4 years later. So between the end of chapter 1 and the beginning of chapter 2, 4 years have elapsed. The book of Esther is not a book that takes place over, a few months. This is a 10-year period from chapter 1 to the end of the book of Esther. And so it's not something that happens just, all at once. It's kind of long and drug out. If you've seen the movie 300, I think it's got Russell Crowe in it and some other people, but it's about one of the battles in this invasion of Greece, okay? The Persian army is trying to get through this pass into Greece. And where they are, this is the only way into Greece. And it's called the Pass of Thermopylae. And it's only about 60 feet wide. And so the Grecian army is there. They got 300 men, and they're there, and they are defending that pass. And they have sworn to their king, King Leonidas, that they will defend that pass to their death. The Persian army is coming against them. They've got thousands of soldiers. And long story short, they end up killing every one of those Grecian soldiers. And they get through the pass, and they get into Greece, and they win a couple more battles. But then the Greeks get an upper hand, and they push back the Persian army, and the Persian army goes home. And when they get home, then, like I said, it's been 4 years since this law went out. And so when he gets back, there's still no queen. And it'll say in the beginning of that, after these things, and that's after this war and after this defeat and after this and after that, the king comes home, he gets a shower, gets a good meal, gets a good night's rest. And one day he wakes up and he realizes, you know what, we still don't have a queen. And so then events start rolling to find a new queen, because they got to have a queen. And so that's where chapter 2 is going to take us. And chapter 2 is when Esther becomes queen. So we're going to meet Esther in chapter 2. We're going to meet her uncle, Mordecai, and we're going to meet some of the eunuchs that serve in the women's palace. And we're going to see some similarities in Esther's story that we see in the story of Joseph. You remember when Joseph was sold into slavery, he became a slave in Egypt. He found favor with his master, Potiphar. And then when he was falsely accused by Potiphar's wife of trying to rape her, he was thrown into prison, and he found favor with the jailer in the prison. And we're going to see a similar situation with Esther when she's in this harem or preparatory harem or something. And we're going to see the process that she has to go through in order to be made acceptable to be presented to the king. So anyway, read chapter 2 before next week, and we will see you then. If you got any prayer requests, holler at me. You can reach me on, I know family knows how to reach me through Facebook Messenger. You can reach me at through YouTube. You can leave comments. you got prayer requests, you got anything you want to talk about, just reach out to me, and we can do that. And I just hope that this study in the book of Esther will be a blessing to you. And I hope that God will show you some things maybe you didn't know. And I hope I don't bore you too much with the history, but I think the history is fascinating as it ties into the biblical narrative. So anyway, we will see you next time. God bless.